Good evening and welcome to Games Aperitif with Lyndon Richardson. There is nothing like the scale of the universe to make your troubles seem insignificant, and similarly compared to the breadth of wonders in No Man's Sky, all criticism feels like nitpicking. This is a game where sandworms frolic beneath butterscotch skies, and penis-shaped monsters dance with gumdrop smiles. In the 4 years since release, the game has had more free helpful updates than a bus full of driving instructors. Base building, freighters and VR have all arrived, and even the much maligned sandworms have now made an appearance. An astronaut cut adrift in space, watching his oxygen supply diminish, may be comforted to think that their troubles are small compared to the grandeur of creation. But that doesn't dispel the fact that, frankly, suffocating still sucks. And in some ways, sadly, so does No Man's Sky. And this, my dear interlopers, is why. Sand, famously, is coarse, rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere, but a sandbox is a fine thing. We gaze out over Hyrule dreaming of what wonders hide in the forgotten valleys, or loom over the dark mountain. In Minecraft we punch the tree to get the wood, to make the pickaxe, to brave the cavern, to forge the iron and one day build the human shredding machine of our dreams. Corporate executives always thought that players needed to be guided by their noses, like conservative voters being guided to an opinion. But games like these proved otherwise. Subnautica is fantastic at this. The game will dangle before you the possibility of a shiny submarine that can dive deeper than ever before, but to get it you need to venture into that mysterious new area that's just outside of your comfort zone. And so the cycle repeats until you are more fish than man. It's 3 AM and your children start to suggest that maybe you should pay more attention to your actual job. But in every game of No Man's Sky, after about 10 hours of play, you reach a certain point where you have your ship or even a freighter and realize that you don't actually need anything else. You can keep jumping to the next system just by collecting the same basic resources. You can build a rover or a walker, but as far as you can tell, you don't actually need those things to do anything. You could grind for a better weapon, but let's be frank, this is a Fisher-Price Nerf gun we're talking about, not the BFG 9000. Ultimately, there are 1,000 things to do, but never a reason to do any of them. But perhaps I am unfair. Perhaps on some distant bubble planet, guarded by the leaky faucet monster of my nightmares, there sleeps a pair of orthopedic shoes that will change my life. But for all this to work, the player either needs to want to go to the bubble planet, or they need to want the orthopedic shoes and know that they're there. Yet No Man's Sky never makes the player want either of those things, or know where they are. But damn, it's gorgeous. I mean, just look at some of the places in these trailers. Every time you start to get frustrated with this game, you see a planet that's beautiful in a totally new way, and you just melt. And when a planet has superheated storms, sometimes literally. Space, famously, is big. Imagine the Prince discography, or the love that a mother has for her child. These things are but as nothing as compared to space. The overwhelming spaciousness of space is one of the unique qualities that draws us to games like this. Yet it's something that No Man's Sky isn't too concerned with. In Elite Dangerous, there's a moment where you start looking at the star map and realise that there's rather a lot of them. Then you zoom out a little and realise that this goes on and on, further than you can really understand. And then you zoom out a lot more and realise that humanity is spread over a truly vast distance. And then you zoom out some more and realise that this area is a tiny fraction of an arm of the galaxy. You move the camera vast distances further and see nebula you have heard of, like the Pleiades and the Orion Nebula, and then beyond these until the nebula just have numbers instead of names, and far beyond these to the heart and far edges of the galaxy. And at that heart, vast black holes leer out at distant humanity. Around yellow suns, rare Earth-like planets await the first man to set eyes on them, while in the voids between arms, endless fields of brown dwarfs sleep and cold barren worlds dream in orbit. All of it procedurally generated, but all of it meaningful, all of it the way it is for a reason, not just locations, but places. To this, the galaxy of No Man's Sky does not compare well. Every system has a space station, every system has planets full of life, and the types of planets are simply random. You can plot a course to the center of the galaxy, but because you can't zoom out to see the galaxy, you have no idea how far along you are, and if you have achieved anything in the day's travel. If you seek a certain type of planet, it could be just as easily in the next system, in one direction or another. There is no reason to travel in one direction instead of another. Each galaxy contains around 1 trillion stars, but very quickly the player understands that every time she travels, she is just rolling the dice again. Perhaps one day a super intelligent hamster will evolve and realize that no matter how fast she scampers in her hamster wheel, the scenery and the rules never actually change. And No Man's Sky makes hamsters of us all. The real universe is vast, yet there is a pattern. Everything is where it is for a reason. Without a pattern, the galaxies of No Man's Sky have no meaning. It seems indulgent to mourn this, like the French poets of La Belle Époque crying into their absinthe. Like them, we mourn that our ennui has taken the joy out of making love to our mistresses on a bed of chocolate. But as we can all attest, even making love to the world's most beautiful women does eventually lose its luster. But enough philosophy. A thing may be fundamentally flawed, yet still be engaging from moment to moment, like a conspiracy theory or a lifetime of alcoholism. But is No Man's Sky engaging? To answer, let us step into the mind of an intrepid spaceman, about to step out onto a new celestial sphere. He asks himself, do I have enough supplies to power my mining laser for the expedition? And this, it turns out, is a surprisingly difficult question to answer. First, he checks the laser and sees it is fueled by carbon. Because the inventory is not sorted alphabetically, he has to read through his entire suit inventory grid to check, and then the ship inventory to see if he has any carbon there, and then the freighter inventory to see if there's any there. Then he recalls that he can also use condensed carbon for the same purpose, so he checks all 3 inventories again for that. Then he remembers that the laser needs to be charged, so he has to check the charge is full too, and he must do all of this again for his engines, his weapons, his warp drive and his life support. But he loses patience long before this, and decides he'll just take the chance, and inevitably lands to discover he lacks sufficient oxygen for his life support. And the game designers know that this is exactly what will happen, so they litter every world with the same convenient identical oxygen-giving flowers that make every planet look the same. And thus we have No Man's Sky as it is. Endless inventory management, tabs within tabs and items within items, 1,000 resources, and none of them actually matter. When I began playing the game, I would often find obscure items like a Gek relic and ponder what wonders this bizarre item might promise if only I understood it. Then I got more such items than I could ever comprehend. The glitching separator, the Korvax convergence cube, the chloride lattice. Most games like this ration out their arcane gizmos until the late game, but this thing's got quantum catheters coming out the wazoo. I've played 140 hours of this game, and I don't know what most of these things are. Worst, I don't care enough to find out. At first, each was a Pandora's box of potential delights, but the more I find, the more I wonder if they're just empty shoeboxes with a question mark drawn on, a distraction for imbeciles. It's not just that, it's that the button that you press to leave the menu is different in every menu. Why are some upgrades in the main inventory and others in a separate tab? How come sometimes I have to press a button to do something and other times I have to hold it? Almost no other modern game makes the basics such a pain. You might say this inventory stuff is minutiae, but is it? If this is what players spend most of their time in the game doing, it's not minute, it's colossal. There's barely time to enjoy all these penis monsters. Instead of getting the core of the game fun and satisfying, the developers have just bolted on more and more stuff in a desperate attempt to appease fans that were angry at release. Over and over again, this is a game that says, hey, we know we've created a system that's too complicated and fiddly, so we're just going to make it unimportant or let you bypass it altogether. We know that managing loads of resources is a pain, so we'll just put these crystals everywhere so you don't have to. We know that your inventory is always full, so we'll just increase the stack size on items. We know traveling across the galaxy to visit a distant base isn't fun, so we'll let you skip it. Don't speak Gek yet? No problem. Unlike everyone else in the galaxy, the crew of your ship speaks English. We know the game still isn't fun, but if we put in the sandworms, will you log back in again? Please, please, just like us. The basic problems are never fixed, and every new feature adds more complexity to a system that was already too complex. At no point has anyone seemingly asked if features like multiplayer or base building actually have anything to do with the core fantasy of a lonely journey across the stars, or worse still, if they might contradict it. It's not that Hello games lack passion, integrity, or generosity, it's that they keep making bad decisions, and the game has become a well-intentioned mess. The risk is that No Man's Sky will die, like the great realist author Honoré de Balzac, corpulently obese from a life of glorious hedonism and consumption, its limbs slowly rotting off with gangrene after years of corpulent expansion, finally overwhelmed by massive heart failure after a glitching separator falls into someone's anomaly. I hope not. The fantasy of being a lonely explorer, making her way across a galaxy of infinite wonders and incomprehensible mysteries, is one that will always draw us back, no matter how the game develops. And that is why people love this game, but it's hard to recommend when it has so many basic problems. By the standards of modern game design, it's impressive, but it's still not fun. It reaches, strives, and yearns for the heavens, but the stars remain forever just out of reach.